Let's look at a very an extraordinary statement, really, and this is coming from the president of the European Council, the Council of Europe, and this is the former president of Poland, Donald Tusk. Tusk, I guess in Polish would be more like it. But he is a top Euroghark, and we find him saying some rather interesting things. Tusk says that there is a danger, or he sees Europe splitting into two ideological camps. And, of course, over austerity. In other words, that austerity is the great issue of the age. That's already bad for the austerity ghoul. They would like something else to be the issue of the age, right? Maybe the clash of civilizations. The clash of civilizations was invented precisely to make sure that austerity or no austerity would not become the main issue of the age. So, according to this Frankfurter Allgemeine, right, flagship house organ of the austerity ghoul international, they say Tusk warned about an ideological split of Europe. And he goes on to say, this is still Tusk, as in 1968, there is a widespread dissatisfaction with the existing arrangements, which could quickly turn into a revolutionary mood. I stress revolutionary mood. This is something important. As in 1968, there is a widespread dissatisfaction with existing conditions, and this could quickly turn into a revolutionary mood. Tusk goes on. The illusion is being awakened or created that there's an alternative to the existing economic system, and that you could have an economy without austerity and without limits. Tusk singled out, among others, and not least, the American Nobel Prize winner in economics and austerity opponent Paul Krugman. And his quote, the quote from Tusk is, "What Krugman is saying is certainly intellectually brilliant, but has nothing to do with reality." Well, I would say to Tusk, why don't you pick on somebody your own size? Say, me. I am the principal theoretician of anti-austerity in this case, and far more radical. I have been working far more to create this dissatisfaction with existing conditions, which indeed could and should become a revolutionary mood. There is an alternative to the existing system of finance capital, the neoliberal or monetarist or austerity-based economic system, a service economy, a rubble field, post-industrial, deindustrialized, unable to maintain services. And of course, if we go back to something that looks like the industrial capitalism of earlier eras, but certainly industrial capitalism, not finance capitalism as we've got it today, not the rule of the finance oligarchs, but a society based on production and expansion, economic growth, but real economic growth, not the kind they talk about, rising standards of living, full employment, rising wages, diminishing the income inequality, but doing so in a way where the entire living standard of the society, the standard of living in the society has to be improved, and that means capital intensive. It means technology intensive. It's based on scientific discovery, technology, industrial modernization, and infrastructure. We're going to talk a little bit more about President Tusk here in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So President Tusk, and this is worth repeating, there is an ideological split in Europe. As in 1968, there's a widespread dissatisfaction with existing conditions, which can quickly turn into a revolutionary mood. The illusion is being created that there's an alternative to the current economic system without austerity. Yes, that's it. And without limits or something of this sort. So Tusk says Krugman is on the wrong track. Well, Krugman is all well and good, but he doesn't have a program and he's not organizing as far as I can see. So Krugman, fine, but there's much worse from Tusk's point of view coming his way. Now, he also, Tusk, he says, we're talking too much about dignity and people getting, degraded. This is a discussion with several European newspapers, among them the flagship Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. And then he tries to be a philosopher of history. History, and especially German history, shows us where that leads. Well, I'm sorry. What we need is the American system of political economy, and that can provide rising standards of living. It makes all austerity completely counterproductive and worse, and we don't need it. So watch out for that 1968 mood that could become revolutionary. So the austerity bloc is split. I think Michael Chiotinis may be too pessimistic. We should be looking again Tsipras, right? Having played the U.S. against Merkel, having played France against Germany, having created this French-Italian front against Germany, the IMF is making demands on Schäuble, even the Eurogawks, right? The Brussels bureaucracy. Tsipras has managed to default on the loan for the IMF for the first time by a European country in recent times. Now, it's clear that if Tsipras had not done this, then it would be impossible to reflate the banking system. But if you want to prepare it, and this is what I urge Syriza to do, if you're going to stay in the government now, use your time. Do two things. Prepare the drachma option on a stealth basis. In other words, get that money printed, get everything ready to go. Get people trained above all. Education. And education means educate the specialists who would have to go into the Bank of Greece when you seize it and take it over and run it. And 0% credit for housing, for infrastructure, and for millions of jobs to safeguard the future of the Greek economy. You have, of course, got to look at where you're going to get your exports in the first 3 months or so. Right? That's going to be critical while you're putting the new system together. If you're forced out of the euro, big if, but you've got to have it ready. If you have it ready, it's a deterrent, and maybe it's less likely that you'll have to do it. If you don't have it ready, you can be dealt with much more brusquely, and that means maybe it's going to be more likely that you get ousted. So do political economy education. Educate teams of specialists. And at the same time, educate the general public about the evils of this privately owned central banking system, of which the European Central Bank is an example. Why the Bank of Greece has to become a bureau of the Greek finance ministry and function according to public law, not according to committees of bankers, unelected, faceless, unaccountable, meeting secretly in oak-paneled rooms. No way. Greek politics divided now between the Erfüllungspolitiker and the Nicht-Erfüllungspolitiker. And in other words, in Weimar Germany, in the 20s especially, you had the fulfillment politicians, which meant pay the Versailles reparations, and the other ones who say no. However, it's not that simple, because deception in conditions like this, strategic deception, the famous Maskirovka, is essential. You can't get along without it. So there's also the Byzantine heritage, right? The idea that you can be more astute, let's say, than your opponents. Let's also just go back to one thing, right? The Hermann Müller government in Weimar, Germany, 1931. And you remember this was a dispute about unemployment insurance. And the reactionary camp, which was large, came forward saying, we want to cut the unemployment insurance precisely at the moment when it's most needed. And a big fight inside the Social Democratic Party, this Social Democratic Party you see today. The Hermann Müller government fell, and this was March, April 1931. And the problem was, it was obviously very bad, unacceptable to allow a cut to the unemployment system. But in retrospect, it might have been much better. I think it would have been better to accept the cut and stay in power, provided that your faction, provided that the members of your caucus, your members, have been educated to the point of understanding. Maintaining political power in politics is the equivalent of maintaining the initiative in military terms. And if Müller had been able to stay in power a little bit longer, might have been very different. As it was, what did you get? Well, Müller fell, and that was the last majority government in Weimar, Germany, until Hitler, and that was at gunpoint after purging the communists and all kinds of other horrendous crimes. So after Müller, you essentially get a year or two of the Brüning government, and after Brüning, it's von Schleicher and von Papen and Hitler. So a lot of people who went through that said it was a mistake to surrender control of the government with all that means in terms of coups, destabilizations, arrests, frame-ups, everything like this. Non-ability to do foreign policy. It was a mistake to surrender control of the government at that point over an issue which was admittedly very, very serious, yes, but somehow you had to do more. And we've talked about the Brest-Litovsk example, right? If Lenin had said, well, this is hopeless, we might as well go home, then no Soviet Union, then think a little bit further. Things would not have been so great. So we would look at that Müller government as a good example of what's wrong with this. I guess it's 1930 that the Müller government fell. It's the spring after the crash of 1929, and again, that's the last majority government. In Greece today, that would be Tsipras is out, suppose, and no government can be formed. That will lead to a government of technocrats. It might lead to a peacekeeping force. It might lead to foreign occupation. And how about Turkey? How about the adventurer Erdogan of the Muslim Brotherhood, who says, well, we want Thrace, right? We want that area in northeast Greece that really belongs to us Turks, right? What's going to stop that? So you've got to, and if you want to stop it, you better have a pretty good alliance with Russia. So if you're going to do that, you better have the foreign ministry. So there are a lot of other things in the realm of political economy that have got to be taken into account. So 38 of 149 Syrizas broke the phalanx, in my view. They broke the shield wall, and out they go. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, our last segment, the 17th of July 2015. Maria Finoshina, the war correspondent of RT, has been traveling from South Carolina to Georgia to Alabama, investigating the question of the Confederate flag. And I'm afraid Maria Finoshina has been doing some rather softball interviews, may we say. Today she was on with a Confederate lady who runs a Confederate flag plant. He says, this is heritage. This has nothing to do with slavery. This has everything to do with states' rights. Well, I'm sorry. That's baloney. Take a look at Tarpley.net. a couple of spaces down the page, scroll down, you'll find the cornerstone interview of Confederate Vice President Alexander Stephens, where he says, this entire enterprise is based on slavery. United States says all men are created equal. We know better, says this Alexander Stephens. We know better. They're all radically unequal, and therefore Stephens for white supremacy. Maria Finoshina, having been interviewed by her myself in Libya and in some other places, she needs to get up to speed on that. How about the Confederate Constitution? How about the fact that slavery is declared untouchable? You can't legislate against slavery according to the Confederate Constitution. You'd have to have a constitutional amendment. So it's slavery, slavery, slavery. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's time also to get Jeff Davis Highway shut down, right? This guy does not enjoy the cult which Robert E. Lee wrongly enjoys. So there we go with that. Obama's the first president to visit a prison. It's interesting, and not the worst. Now let's talk about the Iran deal. This is very important. We want to start the discussion today and keep it up. Please take a look at Tarpley.net. You will find the interview that I did, or the debate I took part in, on Press TV of Iran on the day that this was announced. And I'm very much in favor of this. I believe in diplomacy, war avoidance. It's a very agreeable surprise to see this coming from the Obama administration. What it all shows is that the reactionary bigots, hate mongers, austerity ghouls of the Republican Party, they're much worse than Obama. Why do you waste your time attacking Obama when you have those monsters? And in particular, maybe the worst scoundrel of the lot, Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas. This is the guy who said, a war with Iran would just take a couple of days. Good, you get out there, Cotton. We'll have you and the neocon brigade in the first rank. And remember, neocons are running the foreign policy apparatus of every one of the 16 that we can see so far. The idea that Netanyahu and his deputy prime minister would openly announce that they're planning a high-profile interference in U.S. internal affairs is an unfriendly act, as was the meddling of Obama meddling with Obama by Netanyahu against Obama in the joint session of Congress. These are institutional facts that cannot be neglected. Now, we have the Chattanooga gunman. We have this guy, Abdulaziz, originally the family, I guess, from Kuwait. And it turns out now that this Abdulaziz, according to Reuters, has traveled to Yemen and to Jordan. Now, anybody who goes to Yemen gets on a watch list. It is clear. This was between April and November of last year. So he would have been hobnobbing with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, right? That's Yemen. AQAP. That would be the heirs of al-Laki, the CIA lackey. That means, of course, that this guy was very much on the screen of the FBI and other agencies. It looks to me like this is a patsy, and that this shooting is in effect the opening salvo carried out by the enemies of the Iran nuclear accord to try to shut down that accord. And of course, it makes no sense because this has got nothing to do with Iran in Yemen, but they're going to try somehow to spin it. And remember, at this point, any false flag event coming out of the Middle East that's pinned on Iran, don't believe it. Just don't believe it. Discount that in advance. Inoculate yourself and others against this idiotic idea that somehow Iran would choose this moment to do something in the area of false flag operations. They won't do that. So otherwise, we would congratulate President Rouhani of Iran. We would congratulate Foreign Minister Raziv for his work there. And we're agreeably surprised that even Skull and Bones Kerry comes around to this, and that Obama does so. This is all highly interesting. Now, if we could just get Obama to bring more reasonableness to the table in the really big one, the Russian dossier, right, the Russian-Ukrainian dossier, then we would be in much better shape. That's the task we all have cut out for us. Now, Scott Walker has joined the Republican presidential campaign. And as I said in many broadcasts before, Scott Walker fulfills the dictionary definition of a fascist. He is a union buster, an austerity monger, and he is an authoritarian figure. Unfortunately, the Wisconsin court intimidated or bought, right? Maybe they were bought by Koch or somebody. We're told that Walker's dirty dealings in the recall campaign of 2012 have now been approved by these people, this Wisconsin court. Remember what it comes down to. The Republican nomination is going to be Jeb Bush and Wall Street, that is to say CIA, Bush, and Wall Street, or Christie or Walker. Something like this, I think, at the present time, in the sense that Walker has actually been a union-busting goon plug ugly. The thing about Christie is better equipped to play one on TV. He's better equipped to go on television with his pugnacious mug and get on there and break a strike or make some kind of blood-curdling speech which is supposed to scare somebody out in the world, most likely Putin. Well, it won't work. But this is the level of scheming at which the U.S. ruling class operates. And that brings me to one of my constant themes. You will not get a happy ending for the U.S. out of any of these things unless and until the bankrupt, incompetent ruling class that we have is ousted. Now, of course, they're not even the worst, right? We see that the Eurocrats and the Euroligarchs are, in many ways, worse. But the level of incompetence in the United States is magnified by the fact that this is a more powerful state still. So when you multiply the powerful state times the absolute bungling incompetence of the ruling elite, you get a very, very bad result. Obviously, it's a transatlantic crisis of the ruling class, where the European one is more graphic and immediate, but where if we compare the U.S. advantages to what they're able to obtain, over here the level of incompetence is also very, very high. So if you're not willing to get into that, it's not going to work. So I would urge people, don't become a face in the crowd for Bernie Sanders, since that seems to be it, right? The Washington Post is reporting today, Friday the 17th, that Bernie Sanders is getting huge crowds. Well, don't be a face in the crowd, Bernie Sanders. Get something better in your 2016 election cycle. See you next week on World Crisis Radio.